Good afternoon. My name is Ishwar Kapoor. I'm data officer at Library, University of Warwick. So I'll begin my presentation now. So today I'm going to talk about how to manage the PhD research data according to the FAIR principles. And I believe the audience is quite diverse, lots of PhD students from different disciplines. So I will cover some basics of research data, what actually research data means, and what are the good practices involved, and how it actually sits under the FAIR principles. So before I speak a bit more, a little bit about me, who am I? I'm the University Data Officer at Library, and I provide support to university members in planning, managing, and preserving their research data in the light of university and funder policies, and also looking from the open research data infrastructure. And before this, I was just like a PhD student or a research fellow, and I was collecting lots of data, and which led me to move to the data management side of it. And how do I actually provide support to university members? It's by working with different colleagues at Warwick. One is like with working with frontline support team, with some academic and administrative departments, making sure what students' queries are coming through it, providing support there. Working with the infrastructure team in terms of providing any data sharing, storing platform queries, software procurement, depositing data sets in institutional repositories, and etc. Then there are also lots of data sets come through the legal rights and copyright questions. So we work closely with the legal team in making sure that we are compliant to the funder policies and also university policies. Then the other bit is working with the ethics committee in terms of, again, managing the data in terms of making sure it's compliant to university regulations and everything. So making sure data management plans are fully prepared and etc. And then working with the bigger picture, making sure the open data infrastructure workings in progress, making sure any new funder policies are coming and we are compliant to it, working with different university research committees. So it's like working with different fields and providing support to the university members. So my outline of the talk today will be basics of the data, what metadata record means, and what this research data management means, and data management plan lifecycle, and how at Warwick we provide support to PhD students in making sure that we follow the good research data management practice. So this is a very basic slide, what is produced by research. Research produces a lot of things, papers, theses, articles, but from the data aspect, I'm just putting 4 basic words here: research data, metadata, research record, and data documentation. I'll cover in basic what does these things mean. So it's a very simple definition of research data. It's the smallest building block of research, which can be created, or can be observed, or can be collected. It all depends upon the methodology, how you are carrying out your PhD, which is used to test a research hypothesis. So if you use a certain information to prove a research hypothesis, you can categorize as research data. And then there are certain types of research data. It could be analog, hard copy, survey, questionnaires, lab notebooks. It could be digital. It could be Excel spreadsheet, audio tapes, video tapes. And this digital can be a born digital. For example, if you're measuring the blood pressure of a patient, so you are getting the data on your screen. So it's a digital data, born digital. On made digital, if you have a hard copy, if you scan it, if you upload it, you call that as a made digital. Then there is another category of research data. It could be primary. Primary is which is generated by the project. For example, again, you're getting those data on spot. The other bit is secondary. So if you're doing some secondary literature review, if you're trying to model some, let's say, weather in Europe, what will happen in 2050. So you need some data which is published before, and you need some current data to do modeling. So you can rely on secondary data. The other bit is qualitative, just as an image. And the other bit is quantitative. So let's say a professor wants to understand how his course has affecting students' performance. So if he uses those marks as information to prove his objective, he can categorize that as a quantitative data set. So again, you can see the diversity of research data. Just a bit more example, the definition of data is not just a number, it is quite a lot. It could be a document, text, word, PDF, lab notebook, questionnaires, audio, video tapes, test responses, slides, artifacts. If you use that information to prove a hypothesis, a collection, even a Facebook comments, if you use that information. So a list can go on. A bit of metadata. A metadata is a structured information about the data. And it contains a bit of key information. What does data means? Title, it could be a persistent DOI or permanent URL, description of the data, where subject falls, engineering, or medical or psychology, creator, whether you created with collaborators, funders, any funder associated with that, language, English or other, Polish, etc. Publication date, publisher, contact email address, and the list can go on. Every discipline has their own metadata standard. So again, this is a very generic, I put it, and I took it from the data side metadata scheme. But again, every discipline has its own, and you can always find it more on that. Research record. This is always a bit interesting part. I have lots of students come across and say, oh, I always get confused between the data and the record. So there is a very thin line of difference. If you use that information as an administrative material or a supporting document, which are produced before, during, or after your project, that's categorized as research record. So it could be a correspondence. Let's say during a PhD, you're sharing emails with your supervisors. So you consider it as a research record. Consent form, which is quite common. Ethics applications, research reports, social media communication. If you don't use that to prove a hypothesis, but during the admin work, you consider it as a research record. So the FAIR data principles is, I just put a picture here, but it's FAIR means is the findable, so that when you publish your data, when you create your data, others can find it. Accessible, you can access it after a certain time or others can access it. There's always a funny thing happen. People think fairness means you make your data openly available. Fairness doesn't mean you need to make your data openly available. It's more about how much you can discover it and where you can find it. The other is interoperable. So that again, how do you often actually, what are the file formats, whether you can understand it, whether you can generate it further. And the other bit is the reusable. Can you reuse it? Can others reuse it? Because when you publish your data, you need to also put a license according to it so that others can use it in a much more ethical way with proper permissions. So the FAIR data principles cover this 4 umbrella. And how does this sit along with the research data management? I'll discuss it now in a few slides so that you can get much more bit understanding how we can actually make our data under the FAIR principles. So before we jump in, we need to understand what this research data management means. We know what is data, what is metadata, but what does this management mean and why it is important for us. So this data management, it's a very library definition. It means storage, curation, preservation, provision, but don't scare, I'll explain what does it mean exactly. So what it includes, this management, is all about how do you back up your files, who can access this file, choosing the file formats so that you can open even after 50 years, describing the methodology so that you have the proper methodology written. If you, even after 3 years, you want to do that experiment, you can create that data. Not only you, others can also create the data if you have the methodology. And why you should invest time? Because data is a longer, let's say your PhD is 3 or 4 years, but data is longer than that and data stay alive after that. You can use it, others can use it for different future projects. You graduate from your PhD, if you decide to be a postdoc or if you're a professor, you can use that data to create other projects also. This third part is very important. Data can be valuable and sensitive. So we really need to require careful handling. It could be a biometric data. It could be home address. It could be bank details. So it needs to understand where does that data fall? Is it public, restricted, or sensitive? I'll cover this a bit more in detail later. And as a PhD, it also saves one time and problem. For example, help you to work more efficiently, saves frustration during the project. Let's say your supervisor say, oh, give me this file in like 6 hours. I need this now. And if you don't have your data much more organized properly, so it can be a bit, problematic. Allowing you to say data more clearly. If you have 50 data, it's fine. But if you have a terabyte of data, and if your data is not organized properly, it will be a bit tricky to see those data in a much more clear format. And validation. This is a very bit important part. If you publish a paper, you have an image, and if a reviewer comes back and say, I'm not much convinced with this result, could you please show me the raw data? And if you don't have that raw data, your papers can be retracted. So it will lead to a bit reputational loss, not to you, but also to university. So making sure that whatever you produce, your results, you have the raw data as backup. And again, thinking about how much data would you lose if your laptop gets stolen, lab get burned down, your USB drive can corrupted, or hard drive got corrupted, or any third-party cloud service got disappeared. So making sure what we are doing and what could be consequences if this happens, that happens. And the other bit is university research data management policy requirements. For example, at Warwick, we have like maintaining 10 years of anonymized data. Other universities also have, and similarly, your university will also have a data management policies. So making sure we are compliant to that. Not only university, but also funders. For example, at UK, we have UKRI, then it's Horizon Europe 2020. Every funder has their own data management policy. So making sure we are compliant to funders' policy. There's a bit of, in data management, we have the data life cycle, which is a very important bit to understand how we actually make sure our data is compliant to every funder, university policies, and we are following every bit. So I'll touch here. So this data life cycle is all about where are you at the moment and what questions need to be thought at about each stage. It's all about when are you collecting? Are you collecting, are you creating or observing? Then you need to talk about, once you have your data, you think about processing your data. Once you process it, then you have a certain set of data, you analyze it, because then you basically clean the data and you have the cleaner data, you process it. Once you process, analyze it, you decide to publish it, your paper, or you just decide to publish your data set. Once you have your data set published, you decide to archive it. Let's say after your PhD, or maybe during your PhD, if you publish that paper, you want to keep that data as an archive. After that archive, you want to reuse it. And this cycle goes on. So that's what I said. Your PhD could be 3 or 4 years, but the data stays longer. So maintaining that data in a proper way is quite important, so that not only you can use it, others can also reuse it. That's the whole concept of FAIR principle. And in this data management, research data management means there is a data management plan. This is a key word. So data management plan is a living document. It's again, covers each aspect of the life cycle, what this data is about, where are you going to store your data, where are you going to share your data, how long data will be there, what are the costs associated with the data and other things. So it covers each aspects of your life cycle of your data. And it's often required by funders, required by universities, and it's valuable for PGRs, postgraduate research students. So again, I put this image. So how we ensure that we cover this whole FAIR principles. So I thought to explain how we work on this management from the plan, organize, and access side, and how as a university at Warwick, we support actually students so that they're compliant to these 3 aspects: plan, organize, and access. So idea is to avoid this thing happening. This is a messy desk, but again, our desktop could be also be messy. So idea is we need to have proper management in place. So plan, organize, and access covers asking yourself, what are the type of data you're creating? How you're going to document it? What will be the type of your data format? File naming and convention, backup and security, password managers. So there could be many, but I picked up some few important bits. So again, I won't cover this more, but again, making sure what type of data you will be collecting. Asking yourself, are you collecting primary data, secondary data? Documentation. It's a more detailed equivalent of README file. What does it include? It includes who has collected this data, what is the type of data, why the data has been collected, description of the data, what methodologies were used to create the data, were there any hardware or software you used to create the data, are there any assumptions during the data collection or processing or analyzing, why are there anomalies in the data. So if your graph is going up, but if there is a kink in your graph, so there needs to be an explanation for that also in your description. So the list can keep going on and on, but so I just give a bit of important bits here, the documentation. The third bit is file naming and convention. So there are 4 keywords in file naming. It needs to be objectful, meaningful, concise, and standardized, making sure it's consistent throughout your system. So I thought to give you an example, what type of file naming you can actually go for your project. So I like going by order by date. So for example, I did something having a meeting recording with my participant on 22nd of April. So I have everything with my order by date, with my physics subject, chemistry subject, and it says meeting recording, interview transcript, etc. It could be order by type, meeting recording, chemistry, meeting recording, physics, meeting transcript, chemistry, meeting transcript, physics. And then order by subject, it could be either chemistry, chemistry, physics, physics. Again, I'm just giving a bit of example here. It could be first order with numbering. So it's all up to the people how they like it. I generally, when I'm having meeting with my supervisor or anybody, I generally go with my order by date. So the moment you see the name of the file, you get the idea what it is, when was it occurred, with whom it happened, what was the subject. So having the file naming strategy is very important. The other is folder structure. So I made a bit of example here. Let's say you have different folders, different files containing your raw data is there. So let's say I'm access my 2022. I'm doing research on aeroplane, trains, and car. So I access my car folder. From car one, I can access my other files, raw data, process data, analyze data. From that analyzed data, I can file my TXT, MP3, docx. So having that in a proper folder is a bit important. Again, if you are in a very tight deadline to publish a paper or a thesis, reviewers can get back to you and say, oh, you have only 1 week deadline, please give me the raw data. So things are organized, life is a bit simpler then. The other is data storage and security. Understanding the data which you are collecting, where does it fall? Is it public, restricted, or protected? Again, in some different disciplines, we categorize as sensitive. Some places we categorize as protected. So it's very varying. So, but I put it as very generic, but at Warwick, it categorizes as public, protected, or restricted. So as I said, public, which can be easily, there's not much risk associated with it. But restricted, you need to have a proper regulations and put in place. Understanding how you are going to do backup. So a good practice is putting in an encrypted hard drive, but not only, also putting in a network storage of university recommended. So once you have that, you also have a second backup of that. So making sure you have your data on a university cloud, university approved network attached storages, and also an encrypted hard drive. So this is another good example, a good practice. So we understood plan, organize, and access. Then there is another 2 stages is about sharing and preserve. So how to make it? Sharing and preserve has a list of benefits. It has again funder requirements, university requirements, and there is also a concept when not to share. So sharing a data can be a very much beneficial. It can encourage further research branching. It can lead to new collaborations. It encourages the transparency and improvement of research practice. And it reduces the cost of further data collection. For example, right now you have to go from country A to country B to collect your data. So you're traveling, cost is involved with that. So if your data is not with you next 5 years, and if you have to do similar experiment, you need to again travel. So there is a cost associated with that. So making sure if you have a good data management practice in place, you can reduce the cost. It again increases your profile as a research output. So if you deposit your data, you get a permanent URL or your DOI. You can attach in your CVs. You can attach with your related link. You can put in Zenodo. You can put it in your ORCID link. So you can disseminate easily. You can make people aware that you are, you have your data output there. People can contact you for the work. So it increases your profile. This is a very good practice. Where to find this data? Again, I put some few links and where to deposit data. There are certain repositories I found pretty interesting. RE3 data I found, it is a very it's more like a Google Scholar. You go RE3 data, you put some keywords, you can always find some discipline focused repository. But then there is also general repositories, Fixture, Zenodo, GitHub, UK Data Services. There are some special repositories I put from the medical side here, London School of Health Sciences one. And then at university, we have institutional repositories. And similarly, your universities also have institutional repositories. So there are many places you can deposit your data, but also retrieve data for your research methodology understanding. Understanding why you should share your data after project completes. Again, universities requirements have, and also funder requirements. Some funders also have a say. After your project finishes, you need to deposit your data if you are funded by ABC funder. When not to share, this is a bit important. If data could be a financial value or a potential valuable for the patents which could be exploited by the university. So you may not want to share data now, maybe later once your patent is being put in place or once your objective is being completed. The other bit, data could be sensitive, personal information about human subjects. It can fall under GDPR and Data Protection Act regulations. So it's not always easy to share that data. But there is a way you can anonymize it. You can make your data available in an anonymized form. Or you can create a metadata and let people know this is brief description of the data. And if you are allowed through the consent form to share the data, person of interest can contact you and you can release the data on set of terms and conditions. So there are ways to work with some sensitive data, but there are certain guidelines, for example, anonymization and others. So this is my end slide. So I just thought to give you a bit of idea how data management looks like and how it actually sits under the FAIR principles. So and these are the acknowledgements I took from, this is the Edinburgh University's mantra. This is from the Oxford Data Management, and also we have the Managing Your Research Data Library webpage. So if any questions, so yeah, it's all yours.